Well, hello and welcome. I'm Sue Britz,
And I'm Tina Lookbach. Welcome to Retired.
podcast where we talk about what life is like when we put on new tread, new wheels that move us to our next adventure. And today, Tina, we have my friend Claudia Krich who's visiting us. She's right here in studio. Another friend who has written a book. This one's called Those Who Stayed, a Vietnam Diary. So, Claudia, this is Tina. Tina,
Hi,
here's
Tina.
Claudia.
Hello, Claudia.
Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
All
And
right.
just for our listeners to know, like Claudia also was a teacher on this side now of retirement.
That's right. And that's another wonderful part of this whole thing. This is like, you got a whole new life. This is our idea of with our podcast is that there's new tread, new you're tired of one thing or you retire one thing and you move on to the next thing. And so
Completely agree with that.
I remember Claudia from the days when I first started as a teacher. I was on an emergency credential, and I started in 6th grade Spanish immersion, and she was my next door neighbor.
Right. I remember that.
And Sue, that's how I met you as a 6th grade teacher. And you too were my next door neighbor, but my also 6th grade colleague.
I didn't remember you being my next door neighbor.
Yeah. I came and got coffee out of your room every morning. I do remember you were my neighbor.
Claudia taught mostly 5th grade, right?
Well,
then-
second and fifth,
Okay.
mostly.
And then choir was your big thing.
Exactly. I kind of moved
Oh.
from that. After I retired, I still did chorus for, 6 more years, total of 15. Completely my
Wow,
own
I
baby.
did not know that
my only
part of you.
adventure. Yeah. You want to hear why? How that began?
Yeah,
Sure.
I do actually.
Well, there was somebody, I don't remember who, before me who created a chorus at the school. And the whole school had to come to the performance. There were 8 children in that chorus, and they were dreadful. And I made the mistake of saying to somebody sitting near me, I could do better than that. And,
I love that. And you did, though.
I did. I had up to 95 children in my chorus, and a third were boys, which was a very
rare.
hard thing to get. But yeah, it was cool.
It was inclusive.
But I made a big effort to obviously love having girls, but to also get boys, because in this
Yes.
culture, boys and choruses somehow
Are
not-
harder. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. There's no reason for it, no rational reason for it. In other countries, there's no
There's
such
just as
problem.
many. That's so true.
Yeah. Singing joyfully.
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
But not
probably
here.
because we nurture arts more in foreign countries.
Exactly.
It's more respected.
Yeah, and traditional too.
Yeah,
Whereas
that's
here,
true.
I guess, I don't know, I'm just guessing, it became rock and roll, and cool did not mean folk songs and
It's true.
show songs and fun stuff. However,
So,
there were plenty of them who were in it.
So we have more ties. I mean, we were in the same program teaching in the same,
all
district
of
and
us.
everything. Yeah. And we just found out before we started recording that there's another tie between Tina and Claudia. Tina, do you want to
Yes.
say?
Amazing.
Yes, because I had the privilege of teaching your grandchild, Claudia, and it
Cool.
was wonderful. And he was such a delightful student. It's students like that I miss,
Yeah.
that have this desire to learn. Just precious. No throwing of furniture or anything.
Oh,
Just a
no,
nice
no,
boy.
No. I don't know. Am I allowed to say what he has just accomplished?
Sure. You're a grandparent. You get to brag.
Oh, I get to brag. Okay. Well, I can remember him visiting my classroom. I was in a bungalow all by myself out on the field, and my son-in-law would bring him, and he was 2.5, and we were doing a spelling, I don't remember, test or practice or something. Anyway, he got a hold of a spelling list, and then he came up to the front. He was very shy, but he was willing. And he spelled all the words, including all the hard words, the extra bonus words on the spelling test. And that was, I have to say, that was one of the things that led me to think about retirement. Like,
Oh,
come on, the rest of you, come on. Now, I'm not saying everybody can do that at all. Of course not.
right.
But it was fun, and I tried hard. We all did, of course, to make spelling fun, to make learning fun, especially second grade.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, he just graduated from the university at 17. So that's what he went
Amazing.
on to do.
It was a double major, though, too, wasn't it?
Math and physics.
Oh, there we go. That's all. Okay.
The two things that scared me to death and made me a language major.
I know, me too. Spanish was what was your major? Mine was Spanish literature.
It was language, so I was Spanish German.
Oh, what about you, Sue?
Television, radio production, and Spanish.
I didn't know that. Cool.
All right. And with that, we're going to take a little break. Okay, Claudia, so I have to say, this book you wrote, Those Who Stayed, a Vietnam Diary. I remember when I met you, you would tell about your experience in Vietnam, but we didn't get to hear the whole thing. So this book kind of does that. And what I thought I would ask you is, in this, because this comes from a diary, obviously, how does it feel to look back at yourself, read your words from yourself as a young person, because you were in your 20s,
hmm
and re-experience yourself? What was that like when you were putting this book together?
Excellent question.
Yeah,
Sue.
really good question. I was a very avid anti-war activist back then, and I still am, and progressive generally back then, and I still am. On the other hand, now I don't know that I would go off to a war zone to live for
Wow,
2
true.
years in the middle of nowhere where I didn't know the language till I got there.
Wow.
People have responded to the book by saying that we were brave. I don't remember ever feeling brave.
Hmm. How
It,
did you feel?
I felt normal. I mean, we were surrounded by people who were living in war. We lived right there with them. We lived in a normal little Vietnamese house. We weren't protected or guarded or gated or anything. And things happened every day. People died, people were shot, people were arrested, bombed, turned into refugees. And like any war, you do your best and you just keep carrying on. Friends of ours had a little girl there. We almost did. We lost a pregnancy of a boy, but they had their little girl there. And I remember the dad saying at one point, well, of course she could die. Look at all these children around us who are dying.
Mhm.
I thought, yeah, this is true. But it was a reality.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be some horribly racist, I don't remember which Republican president said this, but it was, they don't value life. Asians don't value
Wow.
life.
Oh
Could that
my
have been Reagan?
gosh.
Nixon? Probably Nixon. But,
Our current president.
well,
Well,
yeah, no kidding. But what the reality was, of course, they more valued life because they were so aware of death, and how things can change overnight. This isn't in the book, but there was hemorrhagic fever was pretty common where we were at times. It came and went. And one day, one of our workers of our Vietnamese staff came to work. That morning, his kid was fine. And that afternoon, his kid was dead.
Mm.
Hemorrhagic
oh,
fever is hemorrhaging through your whole body.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what causes it.
Like Ebola kind of thing.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
truly incredibly horrible. And, so that happened more than once. Or plane crashes, which is in my book. That we would fly on Air Vietnam instead of the CIA airline. There was a CIA airline, but we wouldn't fly on it. And the Air Vietnam planes were these old DC-3s, hilarious planes. You climb in the back to get in, and then you go uphill to the front. And they smelled just dreadful, just terrible of
Like
vomit.
stale sweat.
Mostly
Oh,
vomit.
vomit.
And durian and some of the fruits that were really,
Mm.
really stinky.
Mm-hmm.
and I would often see fire when I looked out the window at the wing, the engine. Well, they were prop jets, and I thought that was normal. I was young and not experienced enough, I guess, and I thought,
You
okay,
trust it.
these planes look like they're on fire when they take off. All right, fine.
And you're here to tell the tale.
That's
Barely.
amazing. That's a miracle in itself.
Barely.
You beat the fever, hemorrhagic fever. You beat the plane. You beat the bullet.
Oh, I had, let's see, I had dengue. I had typhoid twice. I had rheumatoid arthritis attack. That's not all.
So, Claudia, you said you didn't feel brave. You never felt that wasn't an emotion that you felt. What compelled you to go there, not fully knowing or fully understanding really what it was, but you went there. And then as you arrived and you saw these things and you endured them, what compelled you to stay?
Oh, to stay at when the war was ending.
Well, to stay in the task, you were at a clinic or hospital where you helped people who were victims of landmines and so forth,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. We ran a rehabilitation center, a large one for civilians in Quang Ngai, which is in central Vietnam now.
See, a lot of people who would experience the dengue or whatever, okay, I'm going home,
Oh, well, I also lost a 6-month pregnancy and was really sick from that. But no, going home never entered my mind. We were there for a 2-year commitment. We ended up staying longer. Yeah, all of us, everybody was there for a 2-year commitment or longer.
So any one of those could have been conceived as an emergency, and you could have opted out and gone home. But what
Yeah.
made you stay then? What was that made you, besides saying I'm going to stay for 2 years, what made you endure through those things?
I never viewed it as enduring. It
Mhm.
was just things that happened and then get back to work
Okay.
or go back to, or occasionally go on vacation. We also got little vacations.
Where did you get to go for
We got to
vacation?
Bali and Nepal. Those were my 2 big ones. So we climbed around Annapurna long before it became a tourist thing. And Bali was completely non-touristy. It was incredible. Women were still pretty much topless. And then I remember one in particular who we got off a ferry to get there from Indonesia, and she wore a white bra on top.
Oh, wow.
She was sort of getting like half dressed, half covered. It was very unusual. Bali was so clean and so pristine. We wanted to use a motorcycle to go around the mountain because Bali is actually mountain oriented, not ocean oriented.
Mhm.
And so we found somebody and we asked if we could rent the bike. I don't remember how we communicated. And he said, he just handed us the keys. That's it. No names, no money, no addresses,
No
nothing.
signing off a waiver.
Nothing. We took it for a couple of days and we brought it back. I assume and I hope we paid him. But yeah, that was really early on.
All right. So, this is the story. Your book's title is "Those Who Stayed." So, could you explain for our readers?
Yeah,
what that was about?
Absolutely. Okay. Why did we stay? When the American evacuation occurred and thousands of the Americans and the Vietnamese left. Oh, by the way, I should add that when I went to Vietnam, the war was declared over by Nixon and Kissinger. The Paris Peace Agreement had been signed in the beginning of January, and we got there in March.
Okay.
So, but it was a lie. Oh, yes. What do they call it now? It's not a lie. It's a
Fake truth or
Representation.
misrepresentation, a la New York Times. Yeah, but it was a lie, and it was nonsense. And huge, the war was continuing and even worse because of increased bombing and just increased everything. The Americans and South Vietnamese didn't want to give up, but there were no American soldiers there when I was there. So anyway, we lived in this little town, and as a couple of months before April 1975, it was pretty clear that America was losing interest in paying for the war, finally, and Vietnamese were losing. The South Vietnamese were losing. Mind you, there were 3 major groups in Vietnam, not 2. It wasn't North Vietnam and South Vietnam. It was North Vietnam, South Vietnam, and the National Liberation Front of South Vietnam. So most of the bombing that was occurring was bombing South Vietnam until a little later, and then they were bombing the living daylights out of North Vietnam. Anyway, they being us. Anyway, our little town, Quang Ngai, showed signs of changing hands. And everybody was talking about it, and everybody was scared, including us. Nobody knew what would happen. Some of our friends would say, "Oh, you'll be fine. You know, the National Liberation Front around here know you." And they did know us because at one point, a couple of our teammates had been sort of unintentionally kidnapped. So we had links. But it was subtle. You didn't look at somebody and say, "Hey, are you a guerrilla soldier?" You know, nobody would ever come out and say, because it was very dangerous. So they would, you never knew for sure. And many of our staff were leaving. They were leaving to go off to an island to wait it out because nobody knew being linked to Americans, even good Americans like us, would that be a bad thing? Would they be in trouble? Nobody knew anything. The propaganda was very intense, and there was going to be a bloodbath, and everybody would be killed and murdered and mutilated and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, turns out we joined the panic from our little town, and we're really ashamed of ourselves, but we left, and we flew to Saigon. Meanwhile, our friend stayed, and we were with the American Friends Service Committee. He was with the Mennonite Central Committee, and we were the only 2 groups in our town. And we learned pretty quickly afterwards. It changed hands about, I've forgotten now, a few days after we left. Perfectly peacefully. Nothing. And the local government, the South Vietnamese government, fled before the liberation troops, as we called them, could arrive. And the North Vietnamese couldn't get there in time. They were just too far away. So there was a vacuum briefly, and then they came, and then some North Vietnamese came, and at one point they said, "Where are the Quakers? You know, we want to meet the Quakers." That was us. But we weren't there. It was very embarrassing. We were so sorry. And it was joyful. It was fun. They were happy. There were some violent things. The police chief was executed. And I don't believe in capital punishment, but he had really killed a lot of people. Anyway, so there we fled down to Saigon, where we stayed, and we just decided there were 5 of us, and we decided we would not leave. Just made that decision. Like we would like to stay and see what happens. And then pretty quickly we were cut off from the outside world. We couldn't contact our program in Philadelphia. And they were very generous and let us make our own decisions, which was unusual. Most programs were pulling out, but we didn't. We had a choice. So when it came to the middle of April, things started. Okay, yeah, I was scared. At that point, yes, I was definitely scared. We were very scared. There was bombing very nearby, artillery, just all sorts of things. And Saigon had never been a war zone. Saigon was like an oasis. But now it was coming very close, and we were aware of it every day. People were panicking. People were trying to leave, as you very well know, by the tens of thousands. And it was dangerous to leave. We decided it was more dangerous to leave than to stay. And I think we were absolutely right on that. Meanwhile, at least 2,000 French expatriates were living in Saigon, were working in Saigon, and none of them left. And the Indians didn't leave from India, Indians. So it was only Americans who were leaving, and panic-stricken Vietnamese, even ones who had nothing to do with Americans. But it was huge propaganda and huge panic. So we just hunkered down and decided to stay and sandbagged the front of our little house, and there were a couple of nights of extreme fear. I admit that. But then suddenly, one morning, it was over. It was extraordinary. All the war sounds were gone. It's like living near a freeway, and then one day, no more freeway.
Hmm.
So that's kind
So
of what we did.
I want to know how you even made this decision, but I want it to the detail. Like, where were you when you decided that you would dedicate 2 years of your life, even though it ended up being more? What was the purpose and intention of going? Like, what was your hope to accomplish? And I want to, if you could describe, like, who were you with? Where were you when you knew this was your calling, that this is something you had to do? Can you
Okay.
describe where you were, how you
Yeah.
made the decision, and the purpose in your reason for going?
Here's what happened. My husband had worked in Vietnam already for 3.5 years before I met him in the same program. So he was there from 1966 to almost 1970. And then he was back, and we met at an AFSC um, program where we were the co-directors. I coming from California, he coming from Pennsylvania.
And what's
What's
AFS?
AFC?
American Friends Service Committee, Quaker
Thank you.
organization. But by the way, AFSC and Quakers do not proselytize. People have thought we were missionaries. We were definitely not missionaries.
Good to clarify.
Yeah,
Thank
and you
you.
did not have to be religious, and we weren't. But we represented a pacifist group, an anti-war group. And AFSC's work all around the world is to go into centers, the worst part of war zones, to help, and ideally to help both sides or all sides of a conflict, which is exactly what we did.
Like mediators, sort of.
Well, yeah, true. There were other higher up people in the American and Friends Service Committee who would like go to Paris and consult and try to make political changes. But we on the ground had we're helping peasants living in a war zone who are one of the poorest. It was the poorest province in Vietnam, so it was anything but glamorous. It was just the opposite. However, back to why we went. So they needed directors, and so they asked my husband and me. We'd only been married briefly. If we'd like to go back to Vietnam and be the co-directors. And we thought about it. Okay, I have to admit my naivete. I said, "Oh wow, it's right near the ocean, and think of the fruit. Think of the mangoes. Think of the the adventure, the little vacations. We weren't paid; we were volunteers, but we did get those little vacations. And that's about all the thought. Oh, and the war was over, right?
See, that's what I'm saying. This is your reuniting yourself with that younger self who would.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't know. I mean, the war wasn't over.
Right.
But my husband had been there in the middle of the war for 3.5 years, and he had happy memories. And he already spoke Vietnamese, so he started teaching me. And back to languages, friends.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we enjoy
love
learning
them.
languages.
We do.
So, and I knew French. I knew Spanish and French. But French didn't work, by the way. People thought that
Oh,
Vietnamese
yeah.
spoke French. No,
I did too. Yeah.
no, not in our town. Maybe in Saigon or not in our town. Nobody. No, it was very Quay Hung, which means country.
Provincial.
Yes,
So
thank you. Good.
when you were called to be a co-directors, what was your charge? Like, what was the purpose? Like, what exactly was your role?
Okay. The program, by the time I got there, was 55 Vietnamese staff and only 6 foreigners. One of us was British. And it sort of ran itself, but because of the high level of corruption, they needed foreigners to bring in supplies, to just make things happen, make sure the payroll got fairly distributed and so on. And we had problems with that too. I allude to some of that in my book, but it was actually much worse. The corruption was really extreme. We would not buy on the black market, and we would not bribe, which made things way slower for us than for other people who would bribe. But we didn't do that because we were an ethical organization. So we were in charge. We hired and fired and got supplies, and a large part of our work was hosting journalists and government people who would come to visit. Pete McCloskey is in the back of my book. He wrote a little excerpt for it, and he was one of the very important key votes on ending funding for the war in Vietnam, and he came to visit us when I was there. So we took people to My Lai, which was nearby, and just did our best to educate them and tell them what was really going on. I have a little anecdote I could share. There was a New York Times reporter named Fox Butterfield. Fox, are you still there anywhere? And he came out, and
That's
he
a
really
hilarious name.
aggravated us because he wanted to do a piece on, as the New York Times tries to do, both sides. So he was talking to all of our hundreds of patients and trying to find anybody who had actually been injured by what he called the VC, which is a derogatory term. Viet Cong and VC are not considered particularly polite. But he couldn't find anybody. Why? Because 99% of our patients were victims of landmines, and it was the South Vietnamese and Americans who planted the landmines.
Oh.
So easy answer.
Yep.
However, he was determined. And based on the way his interpreter asked questions, the interpreter could maneuver the conversation.
Yep.
And did. So that he finally found himself somebody who would respond and think that, I don't remember who it was, that they were doing the right thing. Anyway, end result of this, front page New York Times article, 50-50. This is what the bad commies are doing, and this is the brave South Vietnamese and what they're doing. I may be exaggerating a bit. It's an old memory, but we were really pissed. It was so not true.
So now I want to know, when did you think you would write a book? Did you wake up one morning and go, I have to tell the story? Or had it been breeding in you since you left? Can you tell us a story? And what is the purpose of your book?
Okay, I love it. Okay. In July of 1976, the new Ms. Magazine published a couple of pages of excerpts from my diary. They literally borrowed my diary, chose what they wanted, and it's in print. I still have copies of it. And at the end of it, I wrote, Claudia Krich plans to turn her diary into a book. That was 1976.
So you knew it.
Bicentennial.
Yes. Well, they did that on purpose. July 76 is when they published it. So fast forward.
So it's been brewing.
It's been brewing. No, I really didn't even think about it at all. All during my teaching career, it really was not in my head. Every now and then something would come up, or we'd hear from an old friend in Vietnam, but mostly it wasn't even there. In 2019, we saw Ken Burns and Lynn Novick's Vietnam documentary. And, Ken and Lynn really disagreed with especially their last episode, which completely left out our experience. And it didn't have to.
Wow.
They could have easily contacted the Mennonite Central Committee, the American Veteran Service Committee, or the Shoeshine Boys Project. We were the main people who stayed, but they didn't. And I had even offered some years earlier to be involved in their documentary, and then whoever it was I was talking to got fired or left or whatever. Anyway, never happened. So watching that last episode, I and all the other approximately dozen of us, because we have talked about it, we all wanted to throw tomatoes at the TV screen. It was that bad.
Wow.
And that's when I decided to write my book.
To share your voice, to share the truth.
Yeah, to share the ending. They didn't have an ending. They only ended with Vietnam closed up, bloodbath, Who
That iconic
knows?
shot of the people escaping off the top of the embassy into the
Which I
helicopter.
just learned recently isn't the embassy. It's an apartment
Really?
building where a lot of embassy staff lived. I
Gee.
know, all these years I thought it was the embassy, so I'll share that tidbit with you now. You can join me in learning that. I just learned that recently from somebody I'm dealing with a lot of people now, a lot of scholars and a lot of historians, and they helped me by blurbing my book, which, you know, anyway, it's published by a university press, and so they don't publish diaries. So instead, it's based on my diary, and it is diary form, but it also is fully annotated, historically annotated, checked and double checked, footnoted, and I got help from various people because we old Vietnam hands kind of all know each other.
Makes sense.
So yeah, so I just had to fish around and find somebody who was willing to help.
I like the primary source of the diary itself, but the photographs you have in there too. It's fun seeing you
Yeah,
in
they
there.
make a big difference. I've been showing slides, taking a slideshow around, about 45-minute slideshow that is really effective because all those pictures prove what I said and what I experienced. It's just there they are. It's all true. And nobody's ever questioned it. It's not like I wrote it, last year and it's a memoir. It's not. It's what I wrote in 1975, improved a bit, but the real words are still there. Yeah.
So Claudia, I've known you for a while, and
Long while.
little glimpses of this have come up in conversation before. But so pulling this all kind of together, how did this experience, the experience of staying, being there the time you did, how did it form you in your life? How did it make you the person you are today?
Wow, that's good. Similar to both of you, knowing other cultures, living in other countries broadens you. And I really wish every person in the United States would go abroad, have an experience, find out how other people live. Um, Vietnam comes up in my brain whenever you think of, for example, healthcare there. We went back to visit a couple of years ago, and we have a delightful friend who is now a surgeon, for heaven's sakes. He was a teenager when I met him, and he's a fancy surgeon now. Oh, but they're not fancy in Vietnam. I guess they're kind of like teachers, they're not paid
Mm-hmm.
more than anybody else.
Same with Cuba.
Yeah, yeah. I know. It kind of makes
Yeah,
sense.
they don't go into it for the money. They go into it because they really want to be a doctor.
Exactly, exactly. So he was talking to me about medical care, and he's a very caring, fabulous young man. And, in this country, in the United States, if you have a kidney problem, you can probably deal with it. Well, but not in a poor country, as we all know.
So true.
It's not going to get a kidney transplant or they actually are. I'm not really quite accurate because that's exactly what he's studying, transplants. But, but people out in the countryside, whatever, we just waste uh, our wealth, our abilities with our selfishness. Look at Trump. I mean, how selfish can you be? He's the top,
Is the definition of it.
the definition of self-interest, selfish, and cruelty. And I guess living in Vietnam, which comes back to me more and more since I'm reconnecting with so many people there, it's a more subtle culture. It's a more respectful culture, a generous culture. Uh, I know that sounds general, but it's true. It's a simple fact. People are out on the streets. People are much more caring of each other and more thoughtful. And just I love that culture. But then I love lots of cultures, and I loved ours at one point. Culture, yeah. Government, no.
Claudia, do you think that you experienced post-traumatic stress at all? I mean,
I lost a 6-month pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
That was definitely post-traumatic stress.
Oh.
It was very traumatic when it happened. It was an emergency. It was, by the way, due to, oh, yeah, here's another one, German measles. There was no vaccine. It just astounds me that people would turn down vaccines for their children. When I had a little girl who I really adored, died of German measles, gave it to me, and my would have been son died of German measles.
Mm-hmm.
How ridiculous is that? Oh, and then typhoid, of course, which there was a vaccine for, it just didn't work. Chicken pox, we saw kids with chicken pox. I don't remember regular measles. But the first thing, right away, within the first month of the new government, there was a huge vaccination program. And I have pictures of it, and it's in my book. And it was an attempt to vaccinate adults and children against basic illnesses, and including polio. We did treat polio patients, by the way. I should have mentioned that. We also treated victims of Agent Orange, napalm, and white phosphorus, all three illegal chemical weapons that the United States used in Vietnam.
So
And
you saw a lot of things physically that would be traumatizing. And
yeah,
kind of just to reiterate Sue's point, how did you not just collapse and give in to it? And like, how did you push through it? How did you take care of your own spirit and soul?
funny how that would never have crossed my mind.
You just did it.
Yeah, I'll share one post-traumatic moment that somehow keeps haunting me. We had AFSC had a surgeon come briefly to do some mostly stump revision, which means if a leg or an arm's been amputated, it's not in an emergency situation. It has not been done right in order to fit into a prosthesis,
Mm-hmm.
so it has to be revised. And we literally had a little office turned into a surgery where it was anything but sterile. Our doctor, who's a good friend, would say, "Don't swat the flies. Don't wave them away because they'll just land on another surface." So we just leave the flies where they were. But he was a fabulously good surgeon and really saved a lot of people. But on this particular day, there was a young man, and he wasn't a soldier because I think he was a student, and the entire bottom part of his face was gone under his nose. And I remember seeing his eyes, and he looked at me, and I looked at him right straight in the eyes. And then we walked on. He couldn't be saved. It was really a horrible thing. Meanwhile, there was another young man who is also now deceased, and he had been returned to Vietnam to us from a group called COR, Committee of Responsibility. This was a group that took children from Vietnam to America for surgery and care, and he had lived with a family in America for 7 years. And he had had a similar injury, but not quite so bad, so his face was really badly deformed. Plus, he'd been raised on American food and milk, and he was very tall for a Vietnamese. And the sad fact is that when this was not either in our town or in Saigon, but I think he was in Da Nang, and he was taken for an American or something, or maybe just he looked so freaky. His Vietnamese was not good. His English was very good. And he was somehow killed. We never learned the details. There were apologies later because somebody had misunderstood who he was. So, there was some death, but there was no bloodbath. We felt really bad about him because imagine taking a child, I think he was, 9 when he came to America. He had no relatives in Vietnam, and then they send him back 7 years later.
Yeah.
So he was a young man without a country.
Actually, we're doing that right now. In
Exactly
quantities.
right. We are definitely doing exactly that right now, minus the physical injury, but plenty of emotional injury. Yep.
Supposed to learn from history. Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to happen.
The clear thread that I saw as a reader was you began with the loss of your pregnancy, and that carried you through the whole book
Right.
to the end. And it is it's poetic
Mm.
beyond being personal and traumatic and all of that. The effect that has on you and your husband, your family and friends too. But it's about life and death
Mm.
and all of that you carry. It becomes a very like a poetic thread that goes through the whole thing.
Thank you. That is beautifully said. And yes, that's the so-called plot,
Mm.
if you will, beyond the political. That was the
Caught it.
personal plot. Yeah, you absolutely did. I love that you're saying that. Poetic. Yeah, that's exactly true. From death and then birth.
Mhm.
But
And
yeah,
knowing at the end, I mean, I know your family, but at the end, you see that you have a family that you were able to continue, and the names and everything all had this personal meaning from the experience that you had at that time.
yeah. Nope.
All right. Well, Claudia, thank you so much for having a conversation with us, and we congratulate you on your book, Those Who Stayed, A Vietnam Diary. You can get it on Amazon, like I did, or where else can you get it?
Anywhere.
Bookstores,
Bookstores,
the press.
publisher,
Okay, yeah. So,
University of Virginia Press. Yes, thank you both. This has been super fun.
It's been fun for us too. Thank you.
thanks for listening. Now let's pack up this week's episode in the trunk.
Ride shotgun and be a part of our adventure by clicking on the plus sign to subscribe and follow our show. This will help our ratings and, more importantly, inspire us to keep creating fun and engaging content. We would love to hear from you in the comments sections or email us at retiredpodcastnewtread@gmail.com. Use the fast track lane by sharing episodes with friends, family, and anyone who would like to join us on our road trip through retirement.
Be sure to check the show notes for links and contact information. Retired is chauffeured by Sue Britz and Tina Lookbach. It is produced, directed, and edited by me, Sue Britz. Music and graphics are by me too. Buckle up and tune in next week so that you won't miss your chance to join our retired road trip.